And there we are. I'm actually streaming from my home, and this is my osteopathic office. I don't know if you can see the treatment table behind me. And I only have my sunglasses. Apologies. I have not been able to find my regular glasses, so I've put off doing this video. But I can put it off no longer. So here on my phone, I have the post from Facebook where I have all your questions to my request last Friday for questions to answer. I need to practice being on video. It's an edge for me. Live streaming is also an edge for most people. And I also love teaching about these principles. And I think some of the things I'm teaching are so essential and not well understood. So let me clarify. This this teaching is not about techniques per se. It's not about specific locked up areas in the structure and how to apply any kind of direct work to an area of the body. What it is about, this whole group is about how do we land ourselves in a restorative state in the nervous system so that we can both respond to and integrate treatments that we get from other people, treat ourselves, and also hold the treatments that we receive from ourselves and other people. So it's about running energy, getting the life force circulation going, and also it's about getting the nervous system regulated. And those happen simultaneously. So it's really all one thing. So let's dive right in. The first question was posed by Peggy Wagner Warwick. Thank you so much. And this question was very specific about an anatomical issue she's struggling with being able to hold space in structures in the midline of her face, nasal passages. And this helps us clarify that we're not actually looking at how to do specific things like that. However, she's had some benefit to doing some of the tongue work where, remember, when we are able to contact the entire palate with our tongue and we're able to get the power going cephalad toward the ceiling, we can, every time we swallow, there's about a pound of pressure sending a wave through the whole skull and creating space and opposing the muscles of swallowing, which would have the face and head become narrow and compressed. This kind of function, this right tongue function, it's profound because it's a small action, but it adds up so profoundly over time that without right tongue function, I will estimate that a year of not right tongue function is equivalent to a head injury. And a year of right tongue function is equivalent to healing a head injury. This is very general. It depends on the severity of the energy of the injury. It depends on the power of the tongue work. And the take home message is tongue work is a very, very powerful way to treat your whole body, regulate the nervous system, create space for breathing, rebalance the face, and actually rebalance the entire structure. I often work with the tongue to solve complicated back pain issues because they're, cranium sacrum, it's all one mechanism. And it's interesting, when I learned how to treat babies, oftentimes we would work with the pelvis and the push off of the baby's feet to get the pelvis moving to release birth trauma from head compression in the birth canal. So it's all one thing. We're going to keep coming back to the big picture. So, big picture on this topic, how do we hold a treatment, support a treatment happening in the rebalancing and expansion of facial structures, the creating of the amount of space necessary to support right physiology? I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about the midline. I've never heard anybody talk about the midline this way. As a matter of fact, I think mostly we don't talk about it because it requires talking about the subtle body, which we allude to and don't really know how to choose vocabulary for, that actually is actually understandable by others. So it's something we perceive, right? When I treat a patient, they don't come into the office if they have a functional midline. And the midline isn't just the spinal cord, the spine, it's also an electromagnetic axis. And if you want to get into the mapping of the subtle body, in the Vedic and teachings we talk about, and Taoist teachings we talk about this, a referencing of this midline axis of all of the chakral centers along the midline, and then the meridians extend from those and connect to the electromagnetic field around the body through the chakras. Something like that. The details aren't what's important. What's important is, can you actually sense that the integrity of this essential communication, which is basically the life force river, right? There's a big river. In Taoist teachings, they call it the microcosmic orbit. It either goes up the back and down the front, or up the front and down the back, depending on the needs of the body's balancing. And at any place in the body that this river is disrupted, the flow will be disturbed systemically. So in Qigong, we talk about every joint in the body as a gate. Every joint, vertebra, wrists, ankles, the hinges of bone at the center of the head and the center of the pelvis. And so in osteopathy, we're looking to free those up and allow for the movement of this vital energy to be unimpeded throughout the body. So, what happens with people when the midline dissociates, which happens when the nervous system dissociates? So this is a stress response. What happens is the body's whole healing intelligence goes offline. It also dissociates, and then we don't feel like ourselves. The symptoms can be anything, limitless. And then when we are able to come back into alignment, we have access to intelligence and potency that allows us to heal whatever's going on. And we can breathe in that state as well, because the primary respiration and the secondary respiration can synchronize. And then we start to feel like we're like an engine that's been tuned up, and now we're resting in a really functional idle. It's a smooth and efficient state where the body can really support itself, and then maybe even land itself in surplus, and then an ability to be in service to others, which is what feels the best, I think, to all of us, certainly to me. So the one teaching point I wanted to transmit today is that this wonderful metaphor. So the midline can actually be invoked through intention and attention. And that can be as simple as noticing if you can actually feel this connected circuit of communication happening. So I'm tuning into my body right now, and I'm like, I can feel it a little bit in my belly. It kind of moves over to the right, up in my chest. It's a little bit wonky. I did a pretty long meditation practice this morning, and I haven't been on camera in like a week, so this is a little overstimulating for me. So as I bring my attention into my own electromagnetics, while you're witnessing me, the added attention of the whoever's out there, and I think I see Beatrice and Daniel, which feels wonderful. I'm actually, just my attention is starting to have this feel a little bit more substantial. So having a functional midline is really a lot of times easier if you receive a treatment that establishes it, and then our practice of keeping our attention on it to maintain it is really the easiest way. If you don't have a person, an osteopath or other kind of practitioner to help reboot you, refresh your midline, Any number of practices can help us do it. Whatever movement practice really sort of wakes up your body, right? I do yoga, I do qigong, I do tai chi, sometimes tango dancing will do it, where I can get the whole body moving in a kind of integrated, synchronized way. Continuum movement can be really powerful for this. Yoga is specifically for this. Pilates also works all of the muscles with the goal of creating that organized wave-like function. And I think we might want to do a specific work session just on maybe collectively invoking the midline in a group of people, because having multiple bodies present amplifies the whole process. So the message there is healing is really best done communally. It's definitely more fun that way with the right group of folks and more potent. So the teaching point, besides this invoking of the midline with intention and feeling, right? I can feel my sit bones on the cushion. I can sense my connection to the sky pole, the masculine pole through the crown of my head, and then rooting into the earth, the feminine pole. And then the idea is that the body is suspended between the two, and we can log on to, maybe we would call it the energy of the cosmos above and the energy of the earth below, which are pretty much infinite wells of power and intelligence. So what happens if we don't have a functional midline? Imagine the life force is the main trunk of the river of the chi is through the center of the body. It's like the trunk of the tree. And then our limbs are like the limbs of a tree. So when the midline dissociates, which is really basically what it means to not be in the body, it's like the trunk of the tree saying, I'm going on vacation, you guys need to hold yourselves up. So that's what we find, right? If you put your hands on a person, there's no midline, you're like, oh my gosh, all these muscles that support the shoulder are working so much harder than they would if there was a functional midline. So many people come in with really tight hips and symptoms down their legs and low back, the vertebra really stiff. If there's no electromagnetic midline, all of the structures kind of go and they're just trying to hold themselves stable in the absence of the electromagnetic flow. That's basically what we treat, right? It's so that's pretty much it. Like people say, well, it's about my hip hurts, and I'm working on their head because I can tell that the river's impeded up here in the head, and once we can reignite it, the central nervous system will stop sending signals to the muscles of the pelvis to grip around that hip. So the body will let its own dysfunctional patterns go when they're no longer needed. They're no longer perceived as needed to create the support or to protect the body. And at that point, sometimes, once the midline's reestablished, the body is no longer attached to these compensatory patterns in the periphery. And so once we reach neutral, right? Neutral in osteopathy means subtle body restored, subtle body, physical body integrated, nervous system lands in a regulated state, systemically entirely refreshed. There's no longer an attachment to the dysfunctional compensatory patterns. At that point, it's easy to distract a hip, decompress a hip, mobilize some vertebra, because the fascia will it'll kind of shrink wrap and even become a little bit like beef jerky. But once the chi starts to flow, the tissues start to hydrate and release. And then our job of just the little added direct pressure to maybe stretch some of those micro adhesions and allow the joint to restore to good mobility and nice spring capability that can then be what's happening in the whole body, restoring the body to not only this fully integrated lung of life force, but also mechanically a fully integrated spring mechanism or tensegrity mechanism. The tongue is a placeholder for the whole thing. A little bit of activation in the pelvic floor nicely holds it. And, yoga and Pilates talk about this conscious connecting of the fascia of the abdomen to like the inner corset, where the belly button and the pelvic floor seek to be dynamically interconnected to the spine. No gripping, but that the tissues are engaged so that the whole midline then becomes like a serpent, and restoring this serpent function that can then serve to move fluids and mobilize joints and keep everything lubricated throughout the day. That is how you treat yourself and or hold a treatment if you've received one. So I'm hoping that, Peggy, that this helps you. I know we spoke a little bit directly, and I suggested that you actually go see a colleague of mine, an osteopath in San Diego where you live, because there may be some deeper things you actually need help with until you can get to a place where you are able to hold your treatments and stay in a state of constant flow that allows you to gradually thaw the deeper, older patterns in the body that would pull on this ability to fully cycle and breathe deeply all day. So there's always a part we do ourselves that no one else can do for us, right? You get a treatment, that's wonderful. Your whole system's refreshed. And that's when you get to drive it. You have to keep it going. It's like a music lesson. You get your music lesson like you get your osteopathic treatment. Then you actually need to practice. And it's pretty empowering and pleasurable and fun once the light bulb goes off on what this really is. It means you're in choice and you have the power to be in a way in your body that has a much more comfortable and enjoyable and generative resting state that can be happening all the time. So let's see, how many minutes is that? I can't tell. I don't want to do like such a crazy long video that it's hard to watch it for you folks. So let's see, should I keep going with the questions? I think I'll keep going with the questions and then maybe mark down like at what minute do I answer which one. So going down here, Josh Silver asks, what are the benefits of building carbon dioxide tolerance? What is the difference between excess carbon dioxide and the carbon dioxide that's healthy to build in our system? All right, I know what Josh is talking about is buteyko breathing, which simply means functional breathing. It means breathing secondary respiration that is synchronized with primary respiration. So what we do, because we breathe through our mouths, right? Nasal breathing, when the tongue's on the roof of the mouth, we actually breathe through our noses, which has us receive the right gas mixture, proportions of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nitric oxide. Most of us breathe through our mouths a lot of the time. Like I often have a hard time inhaling through my nose when I'm talking. This is a lifelong pattern I've had because I wasn't breastfed and I don't quite have enough space in my air passages, although I have more than I used to because of the working with the principles that I'm teaching you. And so we lose carbon dioxide when we breathe through our mouths. And what I think Josh is also referring to is that there are practices where we hyperventilate intentionally to build our ability to regulate with less carbon dioxide. Intentionally, we'll become very lightheaded. Like, what practice does this? Wim Hof breathing, Tumo breathing, holotropic breath work, and it's quite altering. It's also quite a reset on the it pushes the body to mobilize, to tolerate this big shift. Now, one of the pieces that happens in Tumo breathing and in buteyko breathing is this is more about Tumo breathing. After you waste carbon dioxide and render yourself low blood level carbon dioxide, then what we do is we hold our breath for a really long time. I actually did 4 minutes last week, which is crazy. I hyperventilated for 40 cycles, and then I held my breath for 4 minutes. And what happened is that I depleted my carbon dioxide and then drastically, and then I reversed and loaded my body with carbon dioxide by holding my breath. Right? Holding your breath is the equivalent of rebreathing your own air into a paper bag. And what happens is, in both states, well, actually, in the heightened carbon dioxide state, it's extremely sedating to the nervous system. So what we're doing is we're expanding the body's range to tolerate heightened carbon dioxide and low carbon dioxide. And we're therefore expanding the range of its ability to navigate a larger window of, well, it's a larger range of function. And that has the body feeling safer, and it has the nervous system build its ability to stay balanced in both places. So it's basically expanding our range of tolerance, the nervous system being corollary with the subtle body. So if we can expand our range of tolerance to everything, then we can also expand our ability to maintain integrity in our subtle body in the face of external overwhelm of any kind. So I hope that helps. It's a little complicated. I want to tell you, I have all of the physiology and chemical pathways and a nice chart if anybody really wants to dig into the biochemistry a little bit more deeply. So, third question. Judith Greenberg asks, how do I develop nasal breathing when I am a mouth breather? This is complicated. I wrote about it in an article. I'm going to put it down below. It's actually not complicated, but if there's an inability to contact the whole palate with your whole tongue, then that has to be figured out. Either there can be a bit of tissue under the tongue or around the lips that prevents a lip seal or the tongue fully contacting the roof of the mouth. That's not an uncommon thing. And then sometimes there isn't enough room for the air to pass. So I can say, hey, breathe through your nose, but if you have allergies and have congestion, you can't do it. So I think right now I'll take the opportunity to show you a nasal clearing technique, which is 90+% effective, and it has multiple pieces. So breathing normally for a couple of breaths, which actually you can't do if your nose is plugged. So you breathe through your mouth or through your nose to the extent that you can. And then you would hold your breath out, pinch the nose, and pull on it a little bit, which stretches the aperture of the drainage portal in the maxillary sinuses. And then you rock your head back and forth 10 times. And you're still in an exhalation. I believe the mechanism is twofold. So you see what I did? On an exhale, I rocked my head back and forth 10 times. Ooh, it actually feels really good. So after 6 or 7 cycles of doing that, pretty much your nose will clear no matter what's happening, even if you have a cold. Now, I believe what the mechanism is that the holding of the breath out increases carbon dioxide in the blood, which dilates everything. It also increases the efficiency of oxygen delivery at the level of the tissues. So the whole body actually becomes more oxygenated in the process of holding our breath. This is counterintuitive. And so possibly what there is like, because I don't think we actually know, is somehow an efficiency of movement of blood because of the dilation of the vessels. And then also there is possibly a retention of nitric oxide going on, which also can affect erectile tissue in the nasal passages and remodel, the word is like create different spaces, actually change the amount of space that is available for air to move over time. So if nasal breathing is difficult for you in the beginning, you will increase your ability by minutes a day or more just by practicing the extent that you can. So I'm going to pop a whole article I wrote on this in the chat because there's a lot to it, and in the comments down below this video, and then take next level questions the next time I come on. So Boog then writes, next question, for very active but also lazy in some habits person like me, which is all of us, who wants to do all the right things all the time? She says she sits at a computer a lot, number of hours a day. What's the most important thing to focus on, be aware of in her sitting arrangement? She says her computer ergonomics are good. Of course that is key. I just had an insight that really what needs to happen is there needs to be more than 90 degrees between the torso and the thighs. So that means, and that way the weight of the body can be distributed from the sit bones all the way down the thighs and create a nice stable base so that we can get this serpent thing going. Remember, it's all about the midline. So is the tongue work. It's all about the midline. And so when I'm sitting, I like to make sure I can connect with the poles, feel my feet on the ground, tune into my stable base, connect with gravity. It's all about the attention being in the body and sensorially activated. Feeling has all of this life force circulation activate. Our attention is what does it. So when I'm sitting, I make sure I have this angle between the torso and the pelvis more than 90, and that I'm connected to sensations in my body, and that I allow for this natural serpent-like motion to happen in the background automatically while I'm doing my work. And of course, sometimes we check out and then we come back in and we check in as to whether or not we're actually doing this letting of the midline be a midline. And when I'm around people, this action is it can be very imperceptible. I'm exaggerating it for the purpose of this demonstration. And I do it in my car. I do it while I'm walking. It's like once you get the hang of it, it's just happening all the time. And that's what we want to. Oh, I see all these comments. The tongue information is very intriguing, says Kalia. I'm so happy to see you here. I didn't even know you were in the group. And Beatrice, hashtag midline. I think that's going to be my new handle. That's so great. All right. Ziprin asks, what is the best way to hydrate the body? You know what? A functional midline is the best way because life force circulation is like it's what's the word I used the other day? It's an expansion. It's a reinflation. It's like static cling on a sock, but on all of our cells, so that they expand. And once you get your energy moving, you know what happens is your blood volume starts to redistribute to all the cells in the body. So you will start to feel thirsty, and then we will also be particularly receptive to hydrating, right? Because also once the energetics come into focus, the nervous system comes into focus, and then we can. Julie, I'm doing a live video. I'll be out in a second. That's my child. Um, Once the subtle body comes into focus, the nervous system comes into focus, then the neurotransmitters that help us retain water function better. This is antidiuretic hormone from the pituitary, and it's also aldosterone at the level of the adrenal glands. So, for many reasons, integrated subtle body, physical body supports hydration. And then, what water would we drink? We would drink live water, which is not what comes out of our pipes. So, we either get it from a stream or we activate it from with either putting a little salt in your water can help, or making a little bit of herbal tea, or putting a little lemon, like something that biologically reinforms the water to become its biologically active state, which is more compatible with our cell walls. Literally, like the surface tension becomes more matching, and then the water that we drink goes and it goes right into the cells where it needs to be to move all the toxins out and get all the nutrients in, so we don't have misfiring when we're replicating our DNA and doing other cellular processes, which is where things go badly, including where cancer happens. So at a certain level of hydration, really cancer doesn't happen. We have measurements to kind of determine, like, how likely is it for your genetic replication to go well. And then also, of course, because water conducts electricity, if we're adequately hydrated, this getting of the whole vital energy circulation to move is much more forthcoming. So there's actually a doctor I know, Zach Bush, MD, triple board certified, super brilliant, hotshot, and amazing guy who's so bright. You look at him, he's like buzzing. He's very radiant, very loving guy. And he said, and he qualified the statement, he said, if you're dehydrated, you're just not going to be as spiritual. You're not going to be able to feel. You're not going to be running your vital energy through your physical body with the same potency. And then last thing I want to say on this hydration piece is that we can get really biologically active water best from foods. Berries, melon. I wrote a whole blog on this recently, where I also will put that down below, and it gives some videos, a TED talk on this topic by a friend of mine, Gina Bria, who's an anthropologist who looked at the whole history of how different cultures accessed water over thousands of years. So brilliant. And also a book she wrote. So all of that is accessible. I'll link to it in the chat so we can move on, because we don't want to overwhelm. Let's see. Lindsay says, oh yeah. Lindsay says she gets, like, I actually see her, and then we have this game going where we try to figure out how long she's really sensitive, so how long is it that she can hold her treatment. And then every once in a while she'll just get whacked out of something. Lots of times it's related to the vehicle, or overstimulation from frenzy with too many life tasks, or sometimes it can be like an allergy. Getting kind of, wafted with a scent that is triggering. So she says, do you have any tips for those really stuck moments when you can't see your osteopath? So I try so many different things. I have an inverter, which is basically an inversion table where I can put myself out on. So the stress response includes a crowding around the front body, a protective response where the midline kind of goes dormant, but we kind of fold around ourselves just to be safe. And so one of the things that can help us unfold from that reaction, because sometimes it's like a sea anemone, it just goes, it can even overreact when there isn't actually a danger, but there's just a perception of a danger. So I'm actually interested to hear what kinds of things work for you. And the things that work for me are different at different times. But one of the things that I think a lot of us don't think about is supporting the body in reversing this reaction. So things that activate the back body. And that means, well, I love a restorative yoga pose called Supta Baddha Konasana. I just love that long, crazy name. But you basically lie on a bolster and you use a strap and you support the body melting over this long, sturdy pillow support. So it can just release and stretch out gradually over maybe 5 minutes. This forward crowding. And then I would say also the other ways that we activate the back body or rebalance the front body, back body, anterior body, posterior body, front, back, is we get our serpent going again, because then they're both available in this dynamic dance where we don't have excess posterior or excess anterior. We're in a neutral, dynamic neutral balance of being able to recruit and fire the muscles on both sides, actually all sides, becomes one three-dimensional morphing thing. This is a phenomenal way to support the nervous system coming back out of shock. And I know Lindsay knows all these things, so there's two additional things. And I think the trick would be combining them all, right? Stretching out the front body. Getting our serpent going, walking in a way that activates the back body, which is grabbing the ground and pushing off so that you're working all the muscles of your butt and the posterior thighs, is phenomenal. It's so grounding and so a powerful way to shift the nervous system back into a regulated state. And then maybe finally, this is maybe the biggest thing if we're really in trouble. We have to decompress the base of the skull, because that is the brain stem. And without fail, when people really lock up, there is this kind of shrink wrap around the brain stem, which completely traps the nervous system and has us really have a hard time getting out. So how do we do this? Well, you can put 2 tennis balls in a sock and just lay on it for a period of time while you work your other tools, work your visualization of your midline, your tree trunk, work your feeling state. The more you feel, the less you, right? Fight, flight, freeze, hide. That's one channel. Rest, digest, heal, feel. That's another channel. So the more we feel, the more we rest, digest, and heal. We want to shift ourselves over. So we're feeling, we're breathing through all the way down into the pelvis. Let's imagine we just had a big shock. We're going to get our tennis balls or a still point inducer. There's a little pillow for this on my website. I don't sell it or make money on it. And then we tune into feeling, Tennis balls under the base of the skull. Tune into feeling. Get the serpent going. Maybe we've already done our stretching of the front body over the yoga bolster. Maybe we've done some inversion, if we have an inversion table or an inversion pose or one of those yoga hammocks that has us able to. I'm not sure why that practice is so powerful, but I think what happens is all of our energy kind of gets stuck up here when we go into shock, and then somehow the inversion practice flips things around, and paradoxically it has the energy kind of redistribute through the body. It's a way of reversing things, so I think it kind of gets the circulation going that way. If someone has a better theory on how that works, I'd love to hear it. So that's how I would do it. I would try it, and I would love to hear your thoughts on how to get the body out of trouble. I also include hydrating sometimes, because that really helps the adrenals. I also sometimes have people do very strong Epsom baths, because magnesium is a sedative, a muscle relaxant, and a hyperhydrator. And I use a lot. Like, I'll do a really hot bath and I'll put in a half a gallon of Epsom and I'll sit in there for 20 minutes. Sometimes that's just how we clear our energy. Or the ocean. My favorite is to alternate between a cold ocean and a hot Epsom bath. And here's the thing I want to close with on this particular question, which is that there's no right way. Like, on any given day, my body gives me a different request. Like, what I know a bath sounds really great, but what I really feel a yearning for is to go out on my little mini trampoline and just pulse, or just go lay on the earth and let the earth kind of take all of my stress charge, or reset me through its own frequencies. That's powerful, right? Laying on the earth, being in nature, no brainer. I'm actually seeing David Kitts was on here, and I just the other day remembered this thing he talked about where he said he just doesn't know how people live in the city and manage, because it's so overstimulating. And I was living in the city at that time, and I was like thinking, I manage okay. Well, now I live in the country, and I can't imagine how people live in the city. But think about this. Like, if you're under compression, like an overstimulating environment, and you're resourcing, and you're actually building skill to handle more. So sometimes when things are hard, you can think about it that way. Like, I'm an athlete training at altitude. There are all these things, threatening to disrupt my life force, and I'm just being stronger than that. So you can always kind of engage your inner power, your spirit, your will, resourcefulness, determination. Your spirit can supersede quite a bit of pretty much everything. So believing in yourself. Next question, Yogesh says, how does osteopathic practice help in developing neuroplasticity? What tangible elements can be measured via the osteopathic practices? Oh, this is great. Well, first of all, we don't need to develop neuroplasticity. We always have it, which means we can always pattern our nervous system at any time, at any age, any part of the body, really. Well, neuro. And then what tangible elements of osteopathic practices? I think what he's saying can expand the range of tolerance of the nervous system. That's everything that we're doing here. Every question has had an element of how we're building neuroplasticity. However, there is an amazing thing I want to talk about that was just triggered by that question, which is that the heart is, whereas I would say that the tongue is kind of a placeholder or activator of the entire midline life force river. So profound. as is our activation of the pelvic floor bandhas and our connection to the ground. But the heart is the center of all of it. The heart is the sun of the solar system, of the whole constellation of all these interworkings, both physically and on the level of the subtle body. So opening the heart, tuning into love, tuning into gratitude and appreciation. So I'm going to close all of this on this question. I wish you were here and we were doing this live, and actually maybe we'll do that next time, but that would be happy for my heart. I'm wearing this Oura ring. It's an experiment, right? I have to research everything because I just need to, especially if my patients are using this and it has to do with nervous system regulation, which it does. Why? Why does it do that? It also tracks sleep. I wish it tracked oxygen levels, but it doesn't do that, like detected sleep apnea. But what it does do is it tracks heart rate variability, which is a reflection of nervous system resilience. So guess what happened the other day? I've been tracking my heart rate variability. That's the thing I'm really interested in with using this device. And it's been sort of hovering in its one little range for a while. It's pretty stable. It's a good rate. Well, I had a breakthrough with my themes. Like, I'm actually moving this teaching toward a more pleasure and enjoyment focus, which is just not a thing that's ever been connected to osteopathy ever. It's like, where is the intersection of Tantra, yoga? Yoga's obviously very tantric, but where's the intersection of medicine with pleasure and enjoyment and love? Like, that's the hot spot. And so I came up with, no, I didn't. I was being supported by this really generous man who was thinking through business stuff with me. And he said, what's the term that really captures what you're saying that maybe you haven't been willing to speak to or admit? And we came up with this term, ecstatic healing. Now, am I going to call the class that I'm doing, an extended class on all of this stuff that I'm talking about? I am doing it. I've done it before, but I'm doing it now for not physicians. Although I want to use all the terms so that lay people start to understand and can benefit from understanding some of the terms that we use that separate people from being able to understand medical literature. I don't believe in that. I think we all need to know everything, and I'm all about inclusivity. So the point of this is that the day that he helped me birth this thing, or own this thing of moving more toward living and teaching and being and healing from an ecstatic, and Lucy and Beatrice, they're in particular going to understand what I'm talking about because of studies that I've done that have included them in the past. Once I named this thing and decided to own it, my heart rate variability reading jumped like 30% for an entire 24 hours. So it's like, once my heart got free, it was kind of amazing. I mean, okay, so that's an anecdotal report. You will hear people say one person's anecdotal experience doesn't actually represent proof of anything. Definitely not. But what it's, and I just felt really like, woo, when I said this. It's an area for more investigation, and I just have a lot of curiosity going in that area. So let's see, wrapping it up. Tangible elements can be measured by osteopathic practices. Heart rate variability. Now, my thesis paper when I was in medical school, this is 18 years ago, at the end of my residency in family practice, I did a lengthy study that I published in the Journal of the American Osteopathic Association. about heart rate variability being something that was influenced by cranial manipulation, not direct technique, but sensory, intuitive level interconnection with the body. I was basically trying to prove that my attention, my consciousness, had an impact on physiology. And the results were kind of amazing. And this is the area that we need to do more. It's not need to. We kind of get to push boundaries a little bit and edges in the direction of consciousness in medicine and in life, as the driver of medicine and life, and as the evidence that how it is that we wield our own intention, attention, visualization can have more impact than just about anything. And most certainly render whatever assistance we get from outside parties more supported and sustained. That puts us in the driver's seat of our healing. That means that our healing is like it's like the book we're writing. We are the authors of the book. And then anyone we enlist to support our healing is like an editor, right? They're not in charge. They offer a fresh set of eyes that we could never be, by definition. Very, very valuable, but they are not in charge. We are in charge of our healing. We get to be in charge of our healing. Whether we like it or not, we get to drive this life, and we get to access our inner power, not by obligation, but by invitation to be present and engage fully and receive fully all of the experiences that come to us by way of our being in a body. So that's the play, that's the game, that's what I'm wanting to experience more of, in terms of as if we're in a laboratory together, understanding what this is really about, which is a dynamic thing in real time that is only a function of the moment and the people present. So thank you for being here. I just posted that tomorrow's Friday, so I would love a whole nother slew of prompts from you. And then if you want to actually be the person or persons who come on the live conversation next time, just say so in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining. Until we meet again, this was so fun. Talk to you soon. Mm-hmm.